Bigger picture on BFM 89.9, the business station.
Hello, you are listening to Live and Learn. I'm Lee Treelan. Australia ranks high among countries many Malaysians would like to immigrate to, but is the proverbial grass greener in the land down under? Michael Soong, who co-authored a book about migrating to Australia with his brother Ken, argues that while the advantages are numerous, many ignore or fail to take into account the disadvantages. Michael, why did you and your brother want to write the book?
Oh yeah, it's like this because first of all, Lynn, thanks for the opportunity for inviting me. I really appreciate that. What motivated us to write that book is because most of the feedback that we listened to from friends and relatives when they came back after migrating to overseas, especially Western countries, including Australia, mostly are on the good stuff. So we really, and having lived there for 6 years myself and my brother Ken for a decade, so we found that there's good stuff, but then again, there's like many places, there are a lot of disadvantages as well. So we decided if you're going to provide a view, you need to provide a more balanced view. So that's what drove us to write the book.
There are actually a lot of migrants from Southeast Asia to Australia in general, but from the title of the book, it seems like you're targeting a strictly Malaysian readership. Why is that?
We can only speak for ourselves because of our background. We're from Malaysia, we have an Asian heritage, so we just write from our perspective. Everyone has a different experience depending on where you come from. Say for example, if I am Brad Pitt and I live in Australia, definitely the experience would not be same as I am Michael Soong.
Okay. So what's the point that you're trying to get across in the book?
The point that we are trying to get across the book is to actually know the expectations, to know the truth, to know the good stuff. We all know about it, but some of the things that we need to watch out and make your expectation real.
At the same time, if somebody's just looking for a 101 guide about maybe migrating to Australia, is this the right book for them as well? If I just want to know, okay, what do I need to do?
Right. So actually, this is not so much of a 101 guidebook to migrate to Australia. It's just telling you from our perspective, we were once thought that place is all about green grass and all that stuff. But on a side note, if the grass is indeed greener, you need to be aware of the water bill as well. Another thing is it's not a 101 guidebook. We're just sharing our experience. We are documenting our experience from how to get adjusted to the life there, what to expect if you look for job interviews, for employment opportunities, what to expect if you look into going to business and things like that.
Perhaps we could start off then with what are the good sides? What's good about moving and living in Australia?
Well, I think the good stuff, I don't need to elaborate more. Most people have this mindset, like the education standard is much better, and then the weather in terms of the climate, the pollution and all the stuff, and all the stuff we know, politically it's more stable and things like that.
And some people think that the quality of life in terms of work-life balance is better as well.
That is not that. I can't fully agree on that point. Because there's different way of looking at it. Over here, say for example, if you come from a middle class, an urban middle class, for example, a PJ family middle class, if you move over there, you will find yourself suddenly you are not at that place in the Australian society. A lot of things you could not afford, right? Say for example, you could not afford to hire someone to clean your house. You need to do it yourself. You may not be able to afford to eat out every day. You have to do a lot of cooking by yourself, and all this. So it really depends on your situation whether you have a more quality time if you live here or you live there. You see,
So that's one of the things. What are the other downsides that you've experienced in your time migrating to Australia?
A lot of downside is are the things that you do not know if you don't live there long enough. Say for example, if you live there long enough, you will discover the utility bills, your insurance premium, and then your council rate. Council rate is similar to your cukai taksiran here in Malaysia. It goes up almost every year. So and taxes is one integral part that you have to be aware of. Yeah, and then a lot of things that you won't get taxed here, you get taxed over there. For example, like if you put a term deposit, a fixed deposit in a bank in Malaysia, the interest earned you don't get taxed. Over there is part of your income. Yeah, and also your rental, your dividend from shares, if you like. Yeah, they all get taxed. Yeah.
In the first place, why did you and your brother decide to migrate to Australia?
Well, my brother and I studied in Australia, graduated from an Australian university. Like many Malaysians, if they after graduating, they got a chance to apply for a PR. They go for it, and then they thought that it's the ultimate solution for all the problems here. Like, yeah.
How did your experiences change from when you were a student to when you became a working adult there?
It's totally different. Yeah, when you're a student, you're very confined to the university life. You are not actually in the real world. Yeah, so once you migrated over there, you go for employment. Then you figure out how the real world works in Australia. From my perspective, I'm just saying from my perspective. Over there, if you are a migrant from Asia, the realistic expectation is if you are not a tradesperson, you are just a white collar. So the realistic expectation will be you do not expect to have a same position like you have in Malaysia if you go over there. Well, I think that's a lot of people might have told you this sort of feedback. Yeah.
What were the challenges that the both of you faced initially in Australia when you first went over there as students? Did you have challenges, or were you kind of bowled over by how great the country was, or how great you thought it was then?
Yeah, as a student, basically we have this conceptualize of how the Western society works, and then we view ourselves as very so-called westernized. Yeah, we listen to Western songs like Guns N' Roses. We watch Western movies and all that. Then when we went over there, we realized that we are not actually westernized. We are still culturally Malaysian, but with more Western elements. That's all. Yeah. So that is different. So that we got a so-called a wake-up call that you think you're westernized, but when you go over there, you are just one of the many Asians that they classify you as, and with more Western elements. That's it. So I don't use the terms westernized now. We're still culturally Malaysian, but with more Western elements. That's about it. Yeah.
I assume that a lot of people will ask you what it was like migrating to Australia. A lot of people will come to you with their concerns and their questions. I mean, I'm sure that's partly why the book was written.
Yeah.
So what are the questions that you tend to hear a lot when people come up to you and go, okay, so I want to go to Perth, What are they worried about?
Okay, the top three major factors that worry about is, first of all, where to live, yeah, which is a decent suburb to live in, and is it easy to find employment? Yeah, if you got school going kids, you will ask like which school is good for my kid. Yeah, so these are the top three factors that we always been asked. Yeah.
In your opinion, what's the typical profile of people who would thrive by migrating to Australia, who do well?
All right. This is again my perspective. If you got a lot of capital, all right, so you don't have a problem. You can go into a lot of businesses. Say for example, like in Melbourne, if you got big capital, you can buy, for example, a franchise for Papa Rich, which is doing extremely well, right? But if you are a white collar working class in Malaysia, so you have to be adaptable. You have to accept the reality that maybe the first 3 or 5 years you need to accept position which is actually much lower than you are having in Malaysia, right? But on the contrary side, if you are a tradesperson, a so-called blue collar worker here in Malaysia, you know how you are electrician, you are plumber, you are a cook and all that stuff, then you will thrive. I mean, that will be an instant improvement if you move over there in terms of your salary package. Yeah.
I'm speaking today with Michael Soong, a co-author of a book about migrating to Australia, which is also the topic of today's discussion. Coming up, we find out whether they regret their decision and whether or not it's harder now than it was 10 years ago to migrate to the land down under. You are listening to Live and Learn on the Bigger Picture BFM 89.9.
Does it take to have it
Short
all?
break and then we come back.
Yeah, okay, thank
To
you.
get what you want without lifting your finger? To be safe on every road without lifting your foot? Introducing the power that you can feel. Ford Focus. Experience cutting-edge innovation and safety with Sync, an active city stop system. Own one now with a rebate of up to 10,000 ringgit. Terms apply. Ford Focus. The power in you. Ford. Go further. Distributed by Sime Darby Auto Connection.
Once upon a time, in a land not so far away, there lived an entrepreneur. Times were hard, and he didn't know where to turn to for help.
Oh dear, where do I even begin?
You shall listen to Open for Business at 10 a.m. for ideas and inspiration.
Thank you, but what about technology? Where can I get the latest information?
My child, head over to Tech Talk at noon.
You have been most merciful. What if I missed out on certain information like accounting and marketing?
Fear not, you always have Resource Center at 1 p.m.
There's one more thing. Some days I just don't feel motivated. I feel restless.
Well, there's always Raise Your Game at 11 a.m.
The entrepreneur was most pleased with his newfound treasures. Only on Enterprise, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., Monday to Friday. And he lived happily ever after.
Be firmly motivated. BFM 89.9.
Good afternoon, this is Live and Learn. I'm Lee Chui Lin. With me today in the studio is Michael Soong, co-author of a book about migrating to Australia. You and your brother, as you mentioned, made the move more than 10 years ago.
That's right.
Has it gotten harder for people who want to migrate to Australia now?
Well, it has in a way, because they have changed the regulations. Say for example, during my time when I graduated from an Australian city, so they do not need you to take an IELTS for migration purposes. So right now, for these few years, they have changed that. So even though you're a PhD, a master degree from an Australian city, you still need to take that IELTS, and that they have set a very high standard for that. Yeah. So, yeah, that in a way it has made it more difficult. Yeah.
Knowing what you know now after your time there, what would you do differently if you could do everything all over again?
Of course, I would do it differently because for my case, when I went over there almost 10 years ago, more than 10 years ago, 2004, my brother and I were running quite a vibrant distribution business in Malaysia. We distribute to retail chain pharmacies like Guardian and Watsons and all that. We're doing in beauty and personal care products. So we were also, during that time, a mindset go to a better place, the typical Malaysian migrant would think during that time. So of course, right now we tend to realize that in Australia they might offer us more political freedom, but in reality the economic freedom in the West, not only in Australia, in Western countries, is shrinking. It's very shrinking. They have a lot of compliance for you to follow, and the cost is horrendous. And of course, the taxes are killing a lot of small entrepreneurs. So I would have done it differently because now I know what's the difference between political freedom and economic freedom. During back then, I have no idea. We just thought that place has more freedom.
In general,
yeah, no distinction between political freedom or economic freedom.
The economic freedom that you're referencing, was that limiting to you because you are a migrant, or is it limiting in general for business people as a whole?
Oh yeah, it's not for migrant in general. Like over here is relatively easy to start a business, right? But everyone might, you might know a lot of people might have side business or small entrepreneurs, starting up businesses. Everyone is doing something, right? That's my observation. But over there, everyone is just talking about having a job, having an employment, because the generation now no longer wants to start a business because the compliance cost is high, and then all these barriers to start, it's turning people off. So the easiest way is to get a job if you can. Yeah.
There seems to be a hint of regret in you and your brother's decision to migrate. Is that a fair assessment?
Yes. For our case, especially for my case, it is. Yeah.
So why did you decide to return to Malaysia for good?
Because I've decided to take my own advice, and I've realized that I can actualize more over in Malaysia. Yeah, in terms of if I want to start a business, even if I want to go for employment, I got more freedom here economically. Yeah, and also having lived there for 6 years, I would say the Malaysian lifestyle, the cost of living is really value for money, and I can attest to that. It's not because I'm saying that. If you look even if you look more on from the Western side, now a lot of people are in the business telling the people to come over to Asia. For example, if you check out, you can Google International Living Australia. It's a publication, a newsletter that go and find out what what is the places that people could live value for money. Because for example, if a pensioner in Australia is getting a 1,500 Australian dollars pension, he could barely survive in Australia. He could barely afford to pay his rent. But over here, you could live quite comfortably. Yeah. So that is what I see now from a different perspective. Yeah.
What was the process like of coming back here?
For me, it's easy. For me, it's easy because I don't speak for everyone, because I'm easily adjusted to Malaysian lifestyle. As a matter of fact, I feel more comfortable here compared to there. For me, it's easy, but I won't say that would be the same for everyone. Yeah.
Do you still feel any connection to Australia? I mean, do you keep an eye on their news? Do you care about who's going to be the next Prime Minister or what Tony Abbott is saying? Do you still have that sort of connection, I guess, to that country?
Oh yes, of course. I still pay attention to the news. Like even I'm living in Australia, I still pay attention to the news in Malaysia. But yeah, so I just want to know what is happening. Yeah.
You say that Malaysia compares favorably to many Western countries. Is this just a reference to cost of living?
Actually, it's in reference to value for money. Yeah, cost of living, and also in terms of the medical facilities that we are having here. I'm talking about the urban side of Malaysia. I'm not talking about villages, 200 kilometers from nowhere. But in general, actually, what I feel is Malaysia is quite comparable to the infrastructure that we have, or at least what I've seen in Melbourne. Very very much comparable too. Yeah.
One criticism of the book is that it focuses primarily on Melbourne and that most of the tips are relevant only to the Malaysian Chinese migrant experience. Were you aware of this during the process of writing the book?
Yes, we are aware of that, but like I say, yes, it's subjective. It's subjective because it's an experience that we experience. Like I say, I couldn't write an experience not by myself, right? Like I say, if I am Brad Pitt living in Melbourne, I might have a totally different experience. That's true.
How did you co-author the book with your brother?
Okay, he did most of the writing, and I did a lot of research for him, and then I did a lot. We have brainstorming session on what sort of topics that we want to put into the book. Yeah.
You've come back. Is it likely that your brother will do the same? Or, what has been sort of the key difference in your experiences that have kept him in Australia and you deciding that you'd like to come back to Malaysia?
Okay. He may make the move later on because he got some family issues that he need to sort out first. Yeah. So, but the rest, we are pretty much on the same page. Yeah.
Do regulatory differences vary a lot across state boundaries in Australia?
No, just some minor sort of things, but they are very similar. They're very similar.
So it doesn't really matter which state you go to as such?
No, not at all. As a matter of fact, in Australia, if you talk about taxes is a federal issue, so it doesn't matter where you. It's a bit different from United States, where you have to pay a state tax and then you have to pay a federal tax. In Australia, it's pretty much standard. If you talk about taxes, it's all federal taxes, so it doesn't really matter which state you stay. The taxes will be the same. Yeah.
What are your thoughts on the brain drain issue in Malaysia? It continues to be a hot topic. It comes up time and time again.
Well, the brain drain issue actually is to me, there's nothing much to be concerned of, because as a human being from the dawn of human civilization, we've been moving around. right? I mean, if you're gonna accept the argument of the mainstream history, human civilization started off from Africa and then they migrated to all over, right? I mean, brain drain is just part of that. It's just a freedom of movement. That shows, which is a good thing. You see, at least we got freedom of movement. We choose, if you like, we can choose to stay. If you don't like, we can choose to go. Actually, if you talk about brain drain from Malaysia to overseas, you should also start looking at the brain drain from Western society coming into Asia. A lot of Westerners, those are more enlightened ones, they are bringing their capital, their talent into this part of the world. Yeah, so it's a natural phenomenon, especially in this era that we live in. Is everything is so close, right? You have almost zero distance anymore. With the communications like internet and all that. So I'm not worried about the brain drain issues because it's just a natural part of this human civilizations. People go away to places where they think is good, and at the same time there's a lot of people coming here, which think they are, it's good for them. They position themselves differently.
Perhaps it's too soon to ask you this question since, I assume it's fairly recently that you've come back home, is that right?
For around 2.5 months.
Okay, so that's recent. But with considering, that your process of migration to Australia was kind of a natural progression. You studied there and then there was the option for PR, so you took it. Now that you know what it's like to migrate to another country and you kind of have had the understanding that you wanted to come home, do you see yourself ever migrating again to somewhere else?
Well, I mean, I cannot say I would not, right? Because I don't know how the situation or how my mindset will be 5 years later. We all evolve, situations evolve, right? So that's never like certain for anything. So, but I can tell you something. I mean, especially for the audiences, even though you might not be able to migrate physically, there's always the choice of your capital being able to migrate. And I'm not talking about you have to be a million or multi-millionaire to do that, right? I mean, even though you have, say, for example, 5,000 ringgit sort of capital, you still can distribute it, for example, through stock market, right? You can put some in Malaysia, you can buy some shares in Australia or the US. So, I mean, I truly believe in this. Your capital need to be diversified in terms of the geopolitical, across the different geopolitical borders.
For people who are considering migrating from or returning to Malaysia, what resources would you direct them to?
Alright, so if you are planning or contemplating to immigrate to Western countries, so you should also listen to some other views from the Westerners themselves, especially, I mean, like most of the people that I listen to, like Jim Rogers, Dr. Mark Faber, all this you could Google them, Peter Schiff and Gerard Salente. They give you a pretty good idea of the real and actual economic situation that the West is actually experiencing. For the people who plan to come back, it's easier, I guess, right? So you just have to check out information from your friends and relatives, to see whether they are up to your expectations or not.
Finally, resources aside, what advice would you have to offer based on your experiences of migrating to Australia and coming back home?
Alright, I think we should have this in mind. Do not have this mindset like if you're going to migrate to Australia, that's the ultimate solution for all your problems, because it never will be, right? And also and a lot of people tend to talk about there's more political freedom, more freedom in a Western society to express yourself. At least nobody's going to knock on your door during the night. But you at the same time, you are not you do not forget about the economic freedom, because it goes hand in hand, right? We need to survive, and economic freedom is a daily sort of things that you need to face, right? So set your expectations right, and on the record, I'm not condemning Australia or any Western countries. It's nothing like that. different people have different expectations. Different people have different traits. It might be good for somebody, or it might not be, so suitable for somebody. So just try it out. And a final piece of advice I want to give you is, do not go there just like that, right? Have a few trips, live there for a few weeks, and accustom yourself, and try to live like a local and see whether that lifestyle suits you or not. Yeah, I think that is something that we did not do, as a migrant when we migrated. We thought that this is the place that I knew, from a student's perspective, but it is different if you live there as a local. Yeah.
Thank you very much for your time, Michael. I've been speaking with Michael Soong, author of Migrating to Australia, which is also now available at all major bookstores for 25 ringgit. Thank you again.
Thank you, Lynn.
You've been listening to Live and Learn on The Bigger Picture, BFM 89.9.
Thank you, Lynn.
That's it. Thank you very much.
Appreciate that. Yeah, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah. This is a little souvenir for you.
Oh,
yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I studied in Perth myself, but I never thought about living there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You made a right choice.